Why choose a Sleep Number smart bed?
Can I make my site softer?
Can I make my site firmer?
Can we sleep cooler?
Sleep Number does that. Cools up to 8 times faster and lets you choose your ideal comfort on either side. Your Sleep Number setting. It's the Sleep Number biggest sale of the year. All beds on sale. Up to 50% off the limited edition smart bed, plus free home delivery with the purchase of any smart bed. Ends Monday. All Sleep Number smart beds offer temperature solutions for your best sleep. Check it out at a Sleep Number store or sleepnumber.com today.
What makes a great pair of glasses? At Warby Parker, it's all the invisible extras without the extra cost. Their designer quality frames start at $95, including prescription lenses, plus scratch-resistant, smudge-resistant, and anti-reflective coatings, and UV protection, and free adjustments for life. To find your next pair of glasses, sunglasses, or contact lenses, or to find the Warby Parker store nearest you, head over to warbyparker.com. That's warbyparker.com.
You're listening to 100 Words or Less with Ray Harkins. Hello one, hello all. Welcome to this podcast where we obsess over the details of independent music, whether it's punk, hardcore, indie rock, metal, emo, whatever genre you care about. I most likely speak to a person who is involved with that. Again, all from the DIY/independent lens. Sometimes people are going off and doing a lot of other things with a lot of different partners, but their core component of who they are is connected to independent music. And today I am absolutely thrilled to welcome Tim Williams from Vision of Disorder. The reason that I am thrilled to welcome him on is, for one, he is a very interesting character. Not even character, but a human being. Because when you say character, sometimes that like colors the conversation where it's like, man, this person's a character. That's not what I'm saying. I mean, he is a character, but you get it. Tim is the vocalist for Vision of Disorder. He also sang for Blood Simple, and then he also plays in a band called Rollin' Coffin. That is his newest musical project, but Vision of Disorder is still gigging, still playing some shows here or there. They were a huge band for me, and I know many people that are involved in the 90s hardcore scene. Vision of Disorder was a totem in regards to being like, oh, this is kind of new metal, but this is metal, this is hardcore. I don't exactly know where they sit. I personally know exactly where they sit in my brain, and that is a amazing metallic hardcore band that has some melody going on with it. But Tim was always an interesting person, and I loved to have this conversation with him. I started bothering him over the beautiful internets, and he was like, yeah, that sounds great. I would love to do that. So we talk, of course, all about Long Island. We actually talk about Ozzfest a lot because they got to play it. This was actually before Ozzy's passing, so we do not mention anything of that sort. So just in case you were like, why are they not talking about how Ozzy passed away? That is why. We talk about a lot of that stuff. So first and foremost, you can always reach the show, 100wordspodcast@gmail.com. Love to hear feedback, questions, concerns, guest inquiries, whatever it is that's on your brain, dump it in there. I will respond to it. Love to hear from you, the listener, because that's why we're here, to connect in some capacity. Also, there is a link in the show notes to a weekly playlist where I dump all of the music I've been recommending on a week-to-week basis for the better part of 2 years in an effort to hopefully help you discover new music. It can be old music that I personally have discovered recently, or a record that I've just been revisiting, whatever it is. Hopefully it inspires you to be like, you know what? I actually need to listen to that band, or I need to get into some new music. And sometimes you are just lost in the sauce. Like the algorithm isn't doing its justice. Your friends aren't being able to recommend you cool stuff. Hopefully this playlist serves as a little bit of a navigator, as it were. Because truthfully, like I worked at a record store for many years, and that was one of my favorite parts of the job, was a person to come up to me and be like, hey, I like these bands. What else do you got that sounds like this? What else is in the marketplace? Not like anybody's saying marketplace, but you get it. Anyways, link in the show notes. And this week's weekly recommendation is the newest Scarab record. Actually, their debut LP. Scarab is an amazing hardcore band from Philly. The LP is called Burn After Listening, and legit 13 minutes long. That shows you what you were signing up for. It's on Rebirth Records, which is an amazing hardcore label based out of Philly as well. Scarab actually is a person who appeared on the show many, many years ago. London Live say he sang for the band Blistered, and he's a person that's been involved in hardcore for a while. He's doing great things, and he sings for Scarab, and it's so damn good. It's like this awesome mixture of like Left 4 Dead, Skit System, mixed with like some Turmoil. It's got all of the hallmarks of my own personal music taste. So I listened to this and I was like, I love this. I love this so much. It's exactly what I wanted it to be. And like I said, it's their debut LP. They have a 7-inch and a 2-song single that came out before it. So highly, highly recommend you listen to Scarab. Burn after listening. It's super, super good. So anyways, let's talk to Tim Williams from Vision of Disorder. Like I said, he has a new band called Rollin' Coffin. Great stuff. And if for whatever reason you've never listened to Blood Simple, please listen to Blood Simple. Yes, it is more sort of mainstream metal, new metal than what Vision of Disorder was doing, but there are some absolute bangers, especially on the first record. The second record, I don't ride as hard for, and that's completely fine. That's just my own personal taste. But the first Blood Simple record, so good. And Tim was a great discussion. So here we go. Let's talk to Tim from Vision of Disorder right now.
What the feel for time you don't understand? Something still wanting to get escape the way.
As a person of a certain age, I definitely saw you guys living in Southern California. The Showcase Theater in Corona, California was a very important venue to me and obviously a lot of other people in Southern California. But I saw you guys, I want to say it was 97, and you were on tour with Bloodlet, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I remember. That was a long time ago, but sure, that was, I do remember that. That was a day in the life, Bloodlet. At this moment, I can't remember the other band.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I definitely went for you guys and Bloodlet. But what struck me as I mean, at that time, I think I was, 16, 17 years old, just starting to, kind of get into going to shows on a regular basis and understanding the scene. But I remember watching you guys, and what struck me about you, and I know that many other people have said this to you, where you were a really weird band. Like you were hardcore, but you were not hardcore. You were metal, but you were not metal. You made sense in a lot of places, but then you were probably sticking out like a sore thumb in many other places. As you started to experience touring life outside of the context of the Northeast, were people looking at you kind of like an alien, where it's like, I like this, but I don't know what they're doing here?
Yeah, there was definitely some instances of that. Some of the earlier tours, like that one, we were already around a little bit. But some of the earlier tours were just kind of like ferocious, because I think the only people that were coming out were people who really knew about us, at least, and wanted to see us. And I remember playing like Salt Lake City, like these areas that we just would first touch. A lot of that would be with like Earth Crisis and Downset a couple of months, 6 months or so before the tour you're talking about, if my memory serves me correctly. But people were crazy about it, and they were, some of the pits and shows were hyper violent. And I remember that one, because it was just crazy. And I'm sure you hear a lot about this. It was a lot harder for bands and music to get out in those days. So the people who showed up to see people, like, they already know the words, like all this stuff. And it was just really, really wild. And we were okay. And then we started doing tours with Sick of It All in Europe. And there was a lot of that. A lot of like, you guys are not hardcore enough to be out here with Sick of It All. People openly said that to us. So that was a Europe tour. I think it was about 5 weeks. Went all over the place. They hit all the markets. And some shows were good, some shows were not. And a lot of it had to do with we were not that crossover didn't really exist yet. And we definitely did not fit the blueprint of a New York hardcore band going out there with Sick of It All. So we caught a lot of flack, but we made it. And some crowds we won over and some we didn't. And then on the other side of the spectrum, right after that tour, I think we came home for 3 days and then went out on Ozzfest. And now that's a whole different animal where we were not metal enough. Like we were on the side stage and the only, we got along with everybody, but the only band that seemed to gravitate towards us was Neurosis. And, it was probably like a punk, hardcore, subliminal vibe going on there. We were the only 2 bands on the entire tour that didn't have a bus, which was funny. And yeah, so there was a lot of that, and you felt it on the Ozzfest again, same deal. We played on the back. The stage was the back of a flatbed truck that dropped down, and it was probably our first experience with like a 10-foot stage with a 10-foot safety barrier. Like the crowd was far away. And I especially was not used to that. But it's just like anything else. You're on these tours for this long with these people. You kind of just morph into the tour and you pick up the people you jive with. This is at least how it went for me. I can't speak for anybody else, but I'm a pretty open guy, kind of quiet, but at the same, once you break past whatever it is, I start hanging. And I always seem to find people that, made me feel comfortable and stuff like that. And, by the end of the Ozzfest, it was the same thing. We had a bunch of friends that we liked and got along with. But as for a fan perspective, yes, it was like a lot of like, who the hell are these guys? What are they doing?
Right. And I honestly, I forgot that Neurosis did the tour 2 years in a row because I definitely remember seeing the VHS that came out of like a recap of 1996 and seeing Earth Crisis playing in front of a Jägermeister banner.
Yeah.
And then Neurosis. And I'm just like, the fact that Neurosis went out twice and then you guys obviously became friendly with them just because they were probably like, you guys are the only people that come from our scene.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, we got along with them really well, right off the bat. Everything else kind of cultivated it. That was a long tour too, and that kind of cultivated, like I was saying, by the end we had some decent friends and stuff like that. So
yeah, that's cool. And that's the reason I bring that up is just because I think the way that I think most people kind of view the legacy and history of Vision of Disorder is exactly that, where it's like you guys were at home in a lot of scenes, but you never like completely made your bones as a band only existing in that.
Yeah.
And I think that's what probably, to your point, made the band's legacy last, longer to where, here we are talking about a show, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Actually, it was good and bad. And I think at the end of the day, it was a good thing. And it was just where it was. It was the music we wrote and where the times were at that point. It wasn't like any conscious effort. I probably, if I had a choice, I would have chosen an easier route. But, we cut our teeth, as you would say, in that. And, it paid off.
Yeah. I'll pick apart some of those experiences a little bit later, but I'm not going to go through your whole biography because clearly everybody knows that you were born and raised in Long Island. If they don't, they should do just like 4 seconds of research. But your kid life on Long Island, from the way that I've heard you describe it, is definitely, idyllic in regards to like, solid upbringing, sisters in the house, all that sort of stuff. And then you goofed around the beach for the summers and everything. Did you find like, as you were going into, junior high and high school and developing some of your identity, did you feel like you had peers, or were you kind of like, hey, there's the weirdo art kid that writes in his books, or like,
I was definitely, I wouldn't say the weirdo art kid, but I was definitely, I didn't really find, I don't know what you want to call it, my clique until like 11th grade, when I really started to explore being a singer and a musician. Before that, I kind of bounced around a lot, and I didn't have that many friends. I hung out with my cousins a lot who were girls, and it's funny because all the boys, I guess you would call it, out at the beach would want to screw my cousin. So then I made a couple of friends that way.
That's amazing. They're like, hey, Tim, can you introduce me to your cousin?
Yeah, oh, totally. That's exactly when they kind of tolerated me to get to my cousins.
That's incredible. Uh, and so were you, attracted to school as far as I know you've articulated before, like, English and science were kind of interesting to you, but like, did you kind of, maintain good grades and like, did you kind of,
No, I was
no?
definitely below. I wasn't like terrible, but I was below average student. English was cool. Science, I still find them interesting, but looking back, no. And
Got it.
my grades reflect that. I did
Sure.
just enough not to get my ass kicked by my dad.
That's good.
Yeah.
It's a good place to be in where I'm sure you had other friends that, didn't find that line and got in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
And me personally, I was like you, where it's like, I have solid grades, did okay. But like, I never understood my friends that were constantly in trouble. It's like, just get like a C and everybody will leave you alone.
Yeah, pretty much. I was like a 70 student, and that was probably the best, maybe 75. And a lot of my friends dropped out and stuff like that. And, whatever, they went their way.
Yeah. Did you play sports or anything like that? Or
Yeah, I
was
played
that?
up till about, I guess, ninth grade. I had enough with it. But I played soccer for a while. I played lacrosse, and that was a lot of fun. And, I enjoyed that. Yeah. But then ninth grade, I really started getting into metal, music, some of the local drugs, some of the dirtbags from high school. And for that year, at least, I was into, the classic metal bands. And then a lot of those kids got in trouble. Like we already said, I was pretty smart at not going too far. And I just dropped off till about late 11th grade, where I rekindled my friendship with Mike Kennedy. And I started singing for the garage band version of VOD.
Right. Uh, I know that you have articulated the stew of music that you were getting into. I'll put the holy trinity of, Vince Neil, U2, and Pantera kind of all congealing into your musical upbringing.
Yeah.
Um,
Don't forget Jim Morrison. That was like one of the big.
Jim Morrison, yes, exactly.
Right.
Right. What when you started to get exposed to the more, DIY hardcore side of things, like you were saying, when Vision of Disorder first started to come together as a garage band, what was attractive to you about that particular scene as you started to see something that was a little bit different than your other experiences?
Well, right away, it was tangible. Like it was something I can go out and grab, be with. Maybe 50 people show up to a show. It was a great camaraderie going on, you would just, all right, you'd go to a show and you'd make like 2 or 3 friends, and those 2 or 3 friends would know this guy in this band. And it was like this fucking scene. And, one of my earliest, neglect, disciplinary action were like the first hardcore bands that I really liked. Up before that, it was old Pantera, Sepultura, White Zombie, just straight up metal. And then, we slowly started tapping into the local scene through some local bands and stuff. And the singer from Disciplinary Action was a locksmith who worked across the street from the deli I worked in. So we were already totally like nerding out on DA. Like we loved that band, and I loved them. They were the first hardcore band that really pulled me in and made me like, holy shit, what is that? So, right away, he would always come in and get his coffee in the morning. And he's not that much older than us. No one really knows. He might have been 5 or 10 years older than us. But I had a shaved head. He had a shaved head. And one day we just like locked eyes, and he gave me like a nod. Like he knew that I must have known something. And it all was like that. But it was just, if you asked me that question, it was there. It was in your face, and it was local. And, then all the New York City bands like Madball and, Sick of It all these bands that were just right on our doorstep, and you go see them play. And then like the next weekend you're playing a show, and maybe you picked up some sort of influences from their live show, or maybe down the road when your band started to, maybe turn some heads, they showed up at your show, and it was like this thing, But in the Fertile Grounds, it was very tight, small Long Island scene, but very, very, very vibrant. And people were very open, and it was really cool.
I really love that description of the, going in to get his coffee in the morning. Cause yeah, like when you see people, you see like play a show or whatever out in normal life in the wild, you're just like, wait a minute. What this is happening right here. I know I went to this show. I didn't know you worked across the street,
And
and it makes it so real.
the scary thing about him, he wasn't much different in regular life. He was, I always say that was one of the most dangerous bands, the original lineup that I ever saw get on stage. These guys were fucking lunatics, and it was different. And they lived up what they were doing. They were just blue collared dudes from Long Island that were pretty tough. And they were somewhat mentors in a way, not with every view they had, but as for getting out on a band and doing a show and having a good time and giving it your best. They used to drive us to shows and shit like that because they had vans.
You know what makes me happy? Vinyl and merch. And you know what also makes me happy? Our awesome sponsor, evilgreed.net. Straight up one of the best places to buy exclusive colors of vinyl or merch from a specific set of bands. They travel in the heavy music world. And let me tell you, they have a promo code that you can use for this specific show that gets you 10% off of your first order. Use the code SUBURBS, SUBURBS, gets you 10% off your order. Because maybe you're being like, you know what? I want to pre-order the new Fleshwater. Or how about I want to pick up, a Turnstile shirt? Or how about I want to buy a Blood Incantation sweatshirt? Just naming some of those bands, you get the picture that I am painting. They're based in Berlin, Germany, but they ship worldwide, and the shipping rates to us here in the United States are very, very cost advantageous for us. And like I said, they have exclusive colors of vinyl. They have a bunch of awesome things. And they also produce a lot of cool content, whether it's interviews with band members on their favorite records, all that sort of stuff will be found at evilgreed.net. And you'll be able to shop using the promo code SUBURBS. Again, 10% off your first order. Do it. It's a code that is for this specific show. So you will be able to support this thing that I am doing and keeps it free for you. So anyways, evilgreed.net, have fun shopping. When you started to, play in bands and started to bring home this music that was obviously your parents had no idea what you were getting into or doing, clearly they weren't going to stop you even if they tried, but how are they reacting to you getting into this weird stuff and, like coming home with dreadlocks and stuff? How are they reacting?
I was definitely breaking the mold in my family because most of the people are, pretty normal people. And we do have a couple of musicians in the family. But anyway, that's a different story. But
sure.
They probably saw at least firsthand how much time I put into music, whether it was my original shit or even in the early days, how much time I spent with music. My parents, my mom, my dad really didn't care. My mom was, if you just put as much time into your schoolwork as you did at those fucking bands, and that's true stories. Like I was singing since I was a kid. It was just something that was in me. And I was lucky enough to stumble and fall into the right influences that made me want to take it to the next level and do it, But they were pretty supportive. I think my mom was kind of ringside. But my dad was very supportive. He used to wear VOD shirts, and my dad used to work at the airport. And our first tour was with the first Euro tour with Sick of It All. He like brought all the gear in like the back door and packed all our gear up and wrapped it all. He did it legally, but he just said, bring the band here and I'll take care of everything. And we shipped everything through him and he got it all set and boom, gone. So he was pretty cool. He's a Navy guy, so he did his traveling.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing at some point they watched you play, and did they?
They came to Irving Plaza. I forgot if it was it might have been our own show. I can't really remember because we played Irving a lot. But they came to that, and that was a really big show, and they were just like, "Whoa, what the?" That might have been the only time they came to see us. But They came in with we set them up on the balcony. They came in with two friends of theirs. Yeah, they watched the whole show. So yeah,
That's cool.
yeah,
That's really cool. Especially when they can see, like, I think most parents, and I'm sure you can attest to this, being a father, where it's like sometimes you don't understand what your kids are into, but then like when you see the effect of what they are on the world, that's
Right.
when you're just like, that's great. Go for it. Keep doing it.
yeah. They were pretty supportive. I think, especially when the traveling started, they never were like, "You got to quit that shit and get a job." They were never like that.
That's cool. That's cool. Uh, Something I also find interesting in regards to the difference that VOD brought to the, hardcore punk side of things, where it's like, most of your lyrics are obviously dealing with emotional issues, and a lot of bands, especially during that time, whatever, early to mid 90s. Yes, there were bands like, Snapcase that was obviously talking about, more emotional things, but they weren't typical. Uh, was that kind of like, I guess, the easiest way for you to, write, like when you were doing your early poetry and stuff like that, and obviously being influenced by Jim Morrison? Was it always kind of like, I'm reflecting on my inner thoughts rather than, trying to make a fictitious character or something like
Yeah,
that?
no, I've had a few fictitious characters over my career, but in the beginning, it was all raw emotion. I've said this a million times. My music, especially looking back, is completely like psychological, like therapy for me. All the, you know, I guess I'm some sort of an artist, so I tend to be on the darker side of things emotionally. And Yeah, it all comes through personal feelings, how I relate to the world, a lot of the stuff going on around us, and it came pretty naturally. Like lyrics, like poetry, was never really something I had to work at. It kind of just came. I probably do better if I took like some classes, but I never had to. I just know being a musician and what it takes to get somewhere, and anything with talent. The more lessons you can get and the more experience you can get, it's only going to help you. I've seen. Some of my regrets was that I didn't take some sort of lessons and not just operate off of raw talent. Or whatever.
Yeah. Did you intersect or were aware of, like, because I mean, I imagine that some people at some point were, calling your lyrics like, oh, yes, like Tim has emo lyrics. And like, was that ever intersecting with you in regard, especially once like emo became obviously a thing before,
I
the
don't
whole
know if
Fall
I've
Out Boy,
ever
My
heard
Chemical.
emo lyrics for my lyrics, but
Okay.
being a lyricist and writing a lot of poetry and lyrics and all sorts of shit over the years, if somebody takes the effort to open up that fucking jacket and read my lyrics, you could call them whatever you want. I
Right.
really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially because, like, I'm sure you have felt this when, yes, of course, you're bringing your vocal talents to a band, but then also like the additional layer of the meaning that's infused with the music is obviously coupled with the lyrics. And like, if you're not even paying attention to that, like, what are we even doing here?
Yeah, no, well, it depends. You have all different types of listeners. I know people who won't even listen to the singer; they just listen to like the chorus. There's
Right.
there's tons of people like that.
Yep. Yeah. Did you, when you first started to tour, did you take well to it, or was it something that you had to kind of get adjusted to, understanding what touring life was going to be like?
It was super exciting at first, and then when I went to that first Europe tour, I started to, there was like too much. I started to worry about my voice a lot, and it started to get to me and kind of screw with me and make me, feel more isolated. So, I survived it and it was great. But as time went on, I tried not to worry so much about that stuff. And I also realized like what it takes to have a good voice on the road, and that means rest, try not to party that much or whatever it is you're, into. And as long as you're out there playing every night, you're not going to blow your voice out because it's kind of like a muscle. But if you abuse yourself, it's probably going to break down, and so the beginning was real exciting, touring and stuff like that, like all the US. And then as touring went on, I don't know how far we're going into this story, but like my anxiety really, really, really got on top of me in the Blood Simple years, and it was like torture. But there were times where I wasn't waking up till like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'd be in Europe, and I'd just walk right from the bus or whatever we had at that time, the van, right into the venue and just sit in the back room. Like I didn't even care about going out anymore or doing anything. I just wanted to get it over with. So that's what started to happen, and it took a toll on me for sure. And that happened a lot in the BOD days too, like the for the Bleeders tour. A lot of anxiety, and again, it started to get on top of me, and I couldn't get out of it. And then looking back, I still always finished the tours, but no one would know what I was going through when they saw me on stage. For that hour, whatever the set, I was free. I was outside of my mind because there's a lot of dead time on the road, a lot, and it's just you start. At least for me, sometimes I'd start thinking bad stuff, and become like rheumatory and thinking and thinking and thinking. It kind of sucked, but working out, running, hanging around positive people always helped. And looking back and reflecting back on a lot of those lows in my touring career, there's a lot I realized. I know it was external factors and choices that I was making that were making me miserable. And if I'm pretty much retired from the road now, and that's okay. I'll still go out and do some stuff, but as full time, I forget it. And if I was to go back out now, I've done sober tours, since whatever 2008, and 2 weeks in Australia, a week in the UK. Some of the old runs that I've been a completely different person in, and I made it. I just found different things to do, and I wouldn't let those things go down again, which would feed my anxiety and my depression.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, and especially to your point where it's like if you internally feel isolated, and then much of the touring life, even though you're surrounded by people, you feel isolated from like the normal world. You're isolated on top of isolated, and then that's just spirals.
You're completely. If you want to be, you will be completely detached from the real world on tour. It's completely different, and
Right.
It could be good or bad. Really a lot of stuff depends on what you got going on at home too. If you're away and things aren't going good at home, that can really, really fuck.
Absolutely. Reflecting on the Long Island scene that you guys were definitely, a part of helping build, the mythos of that scene definitely traveled out to like me on the West Coast and many people who were engaged in the, pre-internet times, where it's like you hear the lore of like, oh man, like, VOD and other bands are playing a show at the, PWAC, and they're drawing like 2,000 people. And you're just like, what? Like, that's crazy. So when you started to, kind of experience the height of those particular shows where it's like, dude, not only is Long Island a scene, but like this is a real huge music community. Do you have moments that kind of stand out in those, earlier years, or even like, when obviously VOD was first signing to Super Soul and Roadrunner and stuff?
Yeah, there's a lot of really great memories. One of them, obviously, probably one of the pinnacles was the PWAC. It was a really incredible show that took place after we did the Corn show at the Roxy on Long Island, which definitely contributed to the success of that PWAC show. We were exposed to a lot of bands. I mean, a lot of fans during that Corn show that a lot of them came to that PWAC show and like blew it out. And the Northport Pipeline was another really big one for VOD on Long Island. Somebody just posted something today, or maybe yesterday, about the a show VOD doing the Angle back in the day, and that was a really important show because that was like our first proper Long Island hardcore show, where it was a packed house in a well-known venue with a lot of people from the scene. We're talking Long Island, and that was one of the first of many really successful shows for VOD, and it was really great. And so there's fond memories of that. Pertaining to a lot of Long Island shows off the top of my head, those would probably be the top three, that I remember.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, just again, from a person that was observing it from the outside, like it just felt so like you could draw the straight lines from it's like, okay, here's, Mind Over Matter, Vision of Disorder, into Glassjaw, into, Taking Back Sunday. It's like you could just see the through lines of like, oh, this scene was kind of fostered and built, and bands really grew it from there, which is awesome.
Yeah, it was some really great people, and longevity, and the younger kids picking up. We're getting, like Glassjaw you mentioned, and like the Movie Life. Those kids were like tiny kids in the front row of like a VOD show. Like kids. Right. One of the Movie Life, he's like my best friend's younger brother. Like, and those two in particular, the Movie Life and Glassjaw, went up to do their own careers and do really well, and still pretty relevant out there today. And yeah, that's a funny way to say it, but yeah, there is a very direct line that goes through the Long Island heritage, and it's pretty cool to have been a part of it, and it was a great time.
Yeah, absolutely. When I know Ray Capo obviously signed you guys to Super Soul, and then obviously Roadrunner. When you guys started to, engage with the music business, I mean, I know, like you mentioned in previous places, you're like, where, we had no idea what the music business was all about, didn't have management or whatever. As you started to kind of encounter that, did you, care about the music industry, broadly speaking, or did you try to keep it at arm's length for you as a person? Or did you like to roll up your sleeves and kind of understand a little bit of it?
No, I didn't want to really understand it, and I was probably too lazy to care.
Sure.
We were very, very young. Like, we were kids. I don't even know if I was, I think I turned 21, like somewhere during the Ozzfest, like after or before, and it might have been after. I don't even remember. But we were incredibly young. All of a sudden we're with some big fish, big hot shot label. Ray Capo starts showing up to the shows, and I guess later in life, probably a little too late, I became more involved and interested in, had the tolerance to deal with the record business. When we were young, especially the early VOD, we were into hanging out a lot and reaping whatever benefits there were back then. We had a lot of fun, and we also were incredibly ignorant, thinking like, this is it. We've made it. And whatever that even means, I still to this day couldn't tell you. I have a different view of what making it means. And, but, to answer the question, no, we were kind of asleep at the wheel. We had, in the beginning, we didn't have a manager, but then we got a manager, and, whatever. They didn't really, it's not that they didn't do a good job. The early VOD was plagued by poor business decisions, but we still got out there, and we still got to record music, and probably the two best, one record put us on the map, and the second one seems to be the best one we ever did. So it was far from a loss, and it was an incredible learning experience, and we did what bands do. When we were also younger then, we didn't need that much money. We were on the road all the fucking time.
Right.
So we didn't even have jobs until, after Imprint, myself, I got tired of it. So I went and decided to start learning a trade, and everybody else got like whatever they can get to piece together until we got on the road again,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, truthfully, to that point, like that era, like the late 90s, early 2000s, the bands being successful was like you making enough money where you would return home and pay your rent for a couple of months until you went back out. Like that was making a living. You weren't putting money away.
No, especially where we live in New York. You can't afford to be in a band. But, I just never, no disrespect to anybody, I just never gravitated being interested or wanting to really be a part of the music business. I probably could have, wormed my way in somewhere and became something somewhere in that business. But I think where I went is more me and better, and it's just better for me, you know?
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and truthfully, to that point, like there are many people, especially, singers and bands, like sometimes the duties of a band, whether it's like booking shows or handling money or whatever, gets foisted upon the singer. And
Yeah.
the singer sometimes is like, I don't want to have to do any of this. Why are you giving this to me?
Yeah. Well, I do that now, and I've done it since VOD's come back, whenever we came back, whether that was 2008 or whatever. And I don't mind doing it now because I'm older and more responsible, and I have a decent relationship with whatever business people are surrounding VOD these days. So I don't mind doing it now. But back then, forget it.
Right. Yeah.
You didn't want to give me the
Not
money.
Totally. Um, and kind of on that topic, I know you've been like completely open and honest about your, journey like you mentioned, you've been sober for many years now, and the band existing in the sort of perpetual motion machine of, being on the road, partying, trying to like maintain your voice and all the things that you were dealing with. How, I guess in basic terms, like how do you think you were able to, I guess, be functional during that? Because that's like, even though you're surrounded by a lot of that behavior, sometimes like bands completely fall off and they like can't handle themselves or can't even show up to load in or whatever. But you guys were incredibly consistent and workhorses. So how do you feel like you were able to, I guess, balance it?
So one of the key words there is that VOD had a sick work ethic, and if you didn't get on that stage, or you weren't at load in, or you were late to a show, it just simply was not tolerated at all. And we partied very hard for many years, and it just was we were there for the shows, the band. Everybody was putting their life into this, so it really was never a question if you were going to function or not. You had to, and if you didn't, you better make some changes, and it never really came to that. Blood Simple is a different story, but VOD was, we had people, it just wasn't a question. And partying came with the territory. That's what we did. And like I said, we did a lot of it. And, well, when it came time to get to the next show or whatever, we did it. And I'm not saying we did it unsafely. We were, if we have to drive 500 fucking miles, we're going to play and we're going to leave the next second. We'll see everybody in the next town, and, a lot of those early tours we were driving ourselves. So, we would stay in town maybe, and they'd make the net get up early, but it was a rigorous schedule. But, if my voice started to go, I'd hear it from everybody, and they would just say, you better go to your bunk, go read your book. And a lot of that kind of crap was happening in that Europe Sick of It All tour, where I wasn't told, but I was just feeling like shit, and I was worried about my voice, and these guys are partying all around me in different countries. And I'd just be like in my bunk reading, I think I was reading Tropic of Cancer on that tour. And that's what I did a lot of the time, and it kind of got into my head, and it kind of sucked. And, if you most of the tours is days off, so you get days off, you're resting, taking it easy. But we did it, and we were a lot younger. A lot younger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's, I mean, to hear how you guys were operating, I mean, yes, like when you're young, you can burn the candle at both ends, but I do think like what you're talking about, like you took the band seriously, like you took the music seriously and your commitment seriously. And I think sometimes that like when those things get out of whack, that's when, you kind of fall off the wayside. But like you guys were like, okay, like, yeah, we're being irresponsible and partying or whatever, but like we're always going to show up and we're going to be there.
Oh, and we're going to give it 110%. And, of course you might have an off show here or there. And if you did, you would just hear endless shit. And, from my perspective, I don't take to that very well. And I just, always wanted to put on a good show. You don't want to go and do a shitty show. And you also don't want, for me, I've only lost my voice like flat out in all the years, I'm telling you, maybe twice. And all that touring because I know how to sing first of all, and second of all, I know when too much is too much. Like I ain't going out tonight. I'm gonna go and fucking drink water for 2 days straight and get ready for the gig.
I love our friends at Rockabilia for a multitude of reasons. One, they have exclusively licensed merch from bands of all shapes and sizes, punk, hardcore, everything in between. Like right now, they have an amazing Third Eye Blind collaboration with this awesome tattoo artist. They do skate decks, air fresheners, like so many amazing ideas come out of the Rockabilia camp. And on top of those amazing ideas, they want to give you a discount, 10% off of your first order by using the code 100 words or less. That is for this specific show. It shows the love to the show, shows that marketing works. Everybody wins when you're talking about that. And let me tell you, they got everything, whether it's, Black Sabbath, obviously timely. Everyone wants to get their cool Ozzy merch, or if you're listening to the Beatles or you're listening to Hatebreed, whatever it is, they got it. And they have it in spades. 500,000 items, ships from the Midwest here in the United States of America, and it gets to you lickety split. I love this company. I love what they do. I ride so hard for Rockabilia that you should too, because after all, that's where the promo code kicks in. 100 words or less, 10% off your order. Enjoy. You already kind of hit on this, but the Ozzfest 97 experience, like that was, it's such uncharted waters for bands of your guys' level and nature and like the, parking lot show situation. Like, even though Warped Tour obviously existed already, this was a whole new concept. And like you said, you found some kinship with Neurosis, but the way that you guys were met at those shows was, like you said, kind of, you weren't metal enough for the people, but, overall, would you say that you guys were, I guess, met with, somewhat positive responses, or was it just
definitely.
Okay.
It was just a harder show to do. You do Warped Tour. We always wound up doing regional dates, and where would they be? They'd be in the Northeast, so you're playing to your fans anyway, and they're going berserk. Then you wake up and you're in fucking Minnesota in some parking lot, 10 minutes after doors, people are like cheering from the fence. There were shows like that. But the Ozzfest was a completely positive experience for the band. We definitely probably got more exposure off of that tour than any other tour thus far. So even though it was a little rough, we held our own and we did well and we turned some heads. It was good.
Mm-hmm. When you started to, kind of wind VOD down in regards to like the relentless touring pursuits that you guys were doing, I know many people, when they are kind of transitioning into, for lack of a better term, normal life and being like, oh, I was known as, Tim from VOD for years and years and years. Like, who am I without that? Was there, and I know Blood Simple obviously started shortly after, so you were already, looking at creative pursuits beyond that. Was it difficult, I guess, kind of transitioning, out of that identity into, Tim Williams as a human being?
Yeah, definitely was. And, there were two big transition periods. One would be, kind of after Imprint. The first two records, we were really big in terms of VOD. And then when Imprint wound down, long story short, we started to think about getting off of Roadrunner, so we were off the road. And like I said, I decided I got to get a fucking job, and I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go answer an ad for a carpenter's helper in the fucking paper. And that's what I did. And that was a huge transition. Now I'm getting up. I got to be at work at I think their hours might have been 7:30. It might have been 7. I don't remember, but I got to get up. I drive to work. I got all these gruff fucking. I did commercial construction, so I wasn't walking into somebody's fucking house at 9:00. You're walking into like an abandoned building with like metal studs and stuff like that. And I identified better with those people than I did the music business people. So it was good. It was just, it was definitely a transition, and it wasn't easy, but I did it. And that's when my trade started, and that's provided for me ever since.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when that transition was happening, like you were talking about the the idea of, the alcohol consumption and partying and drugs and all that sort of stuff. And I know people reach sometimes multiple bottoms to kind of figure out like, okay, I can't continue to do this. When you, when you became sober, was it, did you feel like it was that kind of like straight line down and then straight line up? Or was it obviously like everybody else's experience kind of all over the board?
Very garden variety experience. But first of all, in 98 was nowhere near whatever you want to call it. Because, carpenters, especially union carpenters, can fucking party rock stars under the table. So
Sure.
I was like jumping out of the frying pan into the fire in that respect. And so yeah, it was a spiral down all the way till about 2008 through Blood Simple, and then it was luckily enough 2008. Basically, what you just said, I realized my life was just fucking out of control, and there's no way I could keep going the way I was going. So I cleaned up, and it's been direct up. Sure, I've had some emotional woes, and I'm not saying I don't face challenges, but I never went back.
Right, absolutely. Which, I mean, honestly, it's really cool to not only see for you as a point of pride, but like people can point to these musicians or artists or anybody that they look up to and be like, oh yes, like, through the darkest of times, you can still put your head down and get through it.
Yeah. And it was a very, very dark time. And I think that would be another interview. But thank God, I pulled myself together and here we are.
Yeah, absolutely. And when kind of reflecting on your time in Blood Simple, like truthfully, like for me as a, punk and hardcore kid, this kind of came out of nowhere. Like I had no real idea that it was like, oh, Tim's doing another band. And I just remember I was, I think I was actually working at Century Media at the time doing A&R, but I just remembered where it was like the demo was circulating or whatever. It's like, this is Tim from VOD's new band. I'm listening to it and I was like, oh, wow, this is awesome.
Yeah.
But like distinctly Blood Simple was like never trying to cater towards that audience. Like you guys were obviously, for lack of a better term, like more mainstream new metal, whatever you want to call it. How did you feel? I mean, obviously it was exciting to play to a new audience. Would you kind of compare and contrast those two experiences as being like night and day, or was it pretty similar? It's just different audiences.
I would say it was maybe not so similar, but definitely not night and day. You're still you wherever you go. The shows were bigger. They were metal, straight up, the scenes changing, during Blood Simple, the new wave of American metal, whatever the fuck they want to call it, was coming, or had come. So it was different, but it was just on a bigger scale and on all aspects. We already talked about partying enough, so I don't think we need to go into any more of that. But the tours were bigger, longer. I wasn't home as much. The record deal was bigger, so there was more money. And the recording experience, we went away. We were gone. I was in Vancouver for like 2.5 months, and I live in New York. It's just, but it was beautiful and it was great. So it was exciting because, first of all, you're just like, holy shit, this is happening again. And it was pretty wild. And it was a big label. So it was a big deal. And, everybody's blowing sunshine up your ass. And it was exciting. And the shows were big from the get-go. So, it was cool. It was definitely a learning and growing experience. Like, that definitely benefited VOD after Blood Simple because, I learned so much in Blood Simple in regards to performing and recording. Like, it was an incredible experience, learning and just being out there still and, just growing. If I ended at VOD, that would have been great, but I would have lost out on 6 or 7 years of insane experience in the business and recording and performing live all over the world and stuff like that. So you just learn a lot.
Absolutely. Well, and to that point too, the way that Blood Simple was obviously structured and set up, it was like, you guys were hitting the ground running. Like here was a, demo, major label deal. Like all systems go. Like if this is going to work, we'll find out in 18 to 24 months.
That's
like here we
pretty
go.
much right. It went from 2005 to 2000. The ramp up was from like '01 to '04, '05 to '08 was the running phase.
Right. And kind of with that experience too, the like bigger shows and, whole different, audiences that you were playing to, did you feel like they were, I know they were obviously different, but like, did you notice any similarities between, I mean, obviously the music taste between the hardcore and metal scene is clearly there, but, did you notice people like, it's like, oh, I'm going to be signing more autographs now as opposed to, a DIY hardcore show? Not really. Would you compare and contrast the audiences differently?
The audiences are definitely different, but it doesn't mean better or worse. They're just hardcore. I feel like they're going to know. They're going to sniff you out if you ain't the real deal. And they're going to hate you for it, and that they'll be done. With metal, at least from what my experience, they're more forgiving. They're more open. Like you could play, I played VOD shows with Slayer, and I played Blood Simple shows with Slayer, and crowds are a little different, and VOD did well with Slayer. That was in the U.S., and then Blood Simple did a bunch of shows in Europe, like East Europe with fucking Slayer, and that's like they only want to see fucking Slayer. That is, and you're just like they don't even know you're on the fucking bill, But we did well, it was real quiet first couple of songs, but by the end, we had them screaming and going crazy and shit like that. But it was, a Slayer fan in Europe is serious.
Yeah, they're not suffering through opening acts. They don't need that. Yeah. Last few things I want to hit on was the like you mentioned, your life as a carpenter. I mean, that was something that was happenstance, but also obviously a choice where you were kind of like looking around. And a lot of that, I know there's like family connections in there, and your father was working at the airport and stuff. Did you, I guess, take to it pretty well? I mean, clearly you did because you're still doing it.
Right away. It was, I came up around that stuff. My dad, again, blue-collar guy, blue-collar family, union family, for the most part. But my dad was always doing handyman stuff on the side. Like, we'd be doing attics or decks and, kitchens, like small jobs that he would pick up and do with his friend. They would hire us to do, like, the hump work and shit. And I always had a hustle. And it came just like singing. It came very natural. And when I got into the officially on my own, and when I started as a helper, I got like connected with the guys immediately. With that business, you really just gotta show up on time and work hard and pay attention. That's how I did it. And I just like music, I kept with it, and I made a couple of moves. If it's luck, if it's not, and you wind up where you're at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I'm sure you could relate to the work ethic experience that you had, with VOD, where it's just like, yeah, what we say we're going to do. Like, we can't not show up.
Yeah, no, we all came from hard working families like VOD. No one was like a rich kid. And we had something in our mind, and we were going to do it. Like, that was it. Especially the early days of all the way up to 2001. VOD was everything. Like, there was nothing else for everybody. Yeah, sure, you teed off when you came home to get a job or something like that. But when the phone call came that, we got another record deal, you call your boss and you quit.
Right.
You're gone.
Right.
That's really what happened,
Right. How, from the, sort of songwriting expression perspective, clearly you've obviously done vocals in all the projects that you have done. What sort of, I guess, instruments did you gravitate towards? Like, can you play guitar? Do you play drums? Like, where?
I don't play drums. Although I would like to, on a more of a simple level, but no, I don't. But I play guitar, and I should have started playing guitar a lot earlier, but I started taking it seriously after Blood Simple. up until then, yeah, I had a guitar and I fucked around with it and I did some stuff, but it wasn't until later that I really started taking it seriously and played it a lot, as opposed to singing, and whatever. It's been a while now, so I'm pretty good. I don't play live at all, but all the Rolling Coffin stuff that's out there, I wrote all that, on a very basic demo level, and then I bring it to my co-producer and co-writer, and he jazzes it up and helps me arrange it and plays it like a real guitar player would play. But
Right.
but I do play guitar and I enjoy it, and it's something I take seriously, and I've gotten pretty good at it, and it helps with my songwriting now, because right now I'm not really in a band. I got my own thing going on with Rolling Coffin, and if I don't do something, nothing's gonna get done. So I write the songs, I start them, and then I pass them to my co-writer, and that's how we do it.
Yeah, that's awesome. The last thing I want to hit on was the VOD. You guys went over to Japan once or twice. How many times did you make it over there?
I think we went over there maybe 3 times, because we did two of our own tours that were pretty. One of them was really long, and then we went back there for one show, like Beast Feast. And that was with, I think, Pantera was on that. And that was like, I always say this because it's true. I've looked it up. That was the last time Pantera ever played as the original lineup, and we would side stage.
That's amazing.
It was
That's
one
amazing.
of the best nights. I've seen them a lot. It's one of the best nights I ever saw them play. They were fucking incredible.
That's so cool.
Incredible. Yeah.
The reason I asked that is because I just like VODs seems to loom large out in Japan. Like, I mean, I've been fortunate enough where I've been able to tour over there a couple of times, and I just like always remember seeing flyer, and I'm just like, so VOD did pretty well in Japan, I guess. Like you guys, which is, I mean, it's cool because I know that like not every band tends to find an audience there. Like, yes, maybe you can go once, but like and play like a random festival or whatever, but to do sort of a longer club tour like you guys did, that must have been a pretty interesting experience, because I presume you probably went over there, what, like 97, 98?
I think it was for the long tours. 97 was right after the Ozzfest. Like literally, we flew out of wherever and fucking right to Japan. And then 98, the Imprint tour, we came back, and that was the extensive tour. They called it the Pacific Rim Tour. So that was like 2 weeks in Japan, hitting a shit ton of markets. New Zealand, Australia, back to fucking Japan, did like another week and a half. So we were like Sapporo, Hiroshima, like towns that all over the place. And it was incredible. Wow. And there wasn't any bum shows. Like people came out, smaller clubs, but people fucking showed up. It was cool.
Yeah, that's all. I mean, 3.5 weeks total in Japan. Like you played every city possible in there.
We're gone. I think that was like a month and a half over there.
Wow, that's incredible. And this last question, I'll put you on the spot, and there's obviously no wrong answers here. But if you were to enshrine, 4, or it doesn't have to be 4, it can be 3, it can be 5, whatever you pick your poison. Long Island bands that are the most meaningful to you, whether it was like you mentioned, your friend across the street serving coffee at the deli band. But basically bands that really, kind of embody to you what, the Long Island that either you grew up with or obviously, played a part in as far as playing shows with and all that sort of stuff. So who are you enshrining as your Mount Rushmore, as it were?
Well, Disciplinary Action, Neglect, Mind Over Matter, Silent Majority. I'm sure the Berserkers, those bands. And I'm sure I will hang up and I'll be like, fuck, I should have said that. But those are the ones that really embodied, Long Island hardcore to me, and really pulled on my strings to take it to wherever I was, to some other level, because I was very young, and seeing these guys get up on stage and do what they did, it was just like mind blowing,
Yeah, no, that's incredible. And I love the Silent Majority because Silent Majority, I mean, yes, people do remember that band. Their legacy does live on, but like Silent Majority was just like a weird band where people, it's like, are you punk? Are you hardcore? I don't know.
Essential Long Island band. Like if you're going to look up Long Island hardcore, you're going to see them. Like they are the embodiment of Long Island hardcore here because it's a certain sound. And some of those other bands that I named, including us, we weren't as direct in that sound as Silent Majority was or is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. For sure. Well, Tim,
one
I
more.
really,
See, I told you.
please, let's add it on
here.
here.
Put this in there. The Warp Weeble Wobbles.
Okay,
Yeah.
please tell me more about that because I have literally never heard of
them. Go look it up.
No.
They're like VOD's sister band, man. Like they were like some of our closest friends. One of them is still. They're all my closest friends, and we went to high school together. Kind of, VOD had our ferocious type of whatever the fuck you want to call it, hardcore, and Weebles were more punk rock, happy go lucky. But they were out there in the Long Island scene, and they did their thing, and they were never really huge, but they're a big part of my story, to this day. So make sure you print that.
That was Tim from Vision Disorder. I don't know why I felt like I needed to sing that, but that's what I was doing. So thank you very much to him for letting me badger him on the internet to get him to agree to a time. These things like scheduling sometimes is difficult, and I appreciate his diligence for making this happen. Next week, I've got another discussion with a person involved in independent music. Wouldn't you know it? This one is a more modern twist, even though this band has existed for 10 plus years. Ryan Kirby, the vocalist from Fit for a King. I will be completely transparent and honest in saying I have never cared musically for Fit for a King, and that's fine. But the value that I think that this band brings to the table is the fact that, one, they've been able to go through a lot of different iterations of the scene per se and been able to be as popular as they ever have been. And Ryan is a very interesting dude, cut and dry, super honest, and those are the combos that I know that will make an interesting conversation. So that's what we got next week. Ryan Kirby from Fit for a King on the show. Until then, please be safe, everybody.